So Mad Dog went, what would be a good thing for a small greenhouse like a 6x6? And this is questions from back at the beginning of the show.
So what I recommend is 4, because 6 makes it very difficult for you to reach in. So most guys do 4 foot and then they stagger the plants. That way you can reach all the way in and do your lollipop and pruning or planting or removing of cover crop, whatever, or amending. So 4x6, 4x8, 4 by whatever length you want.
And remember, you're putting a tray underneath there to hold the water that you're putting in. So consider that in your, that's one of the reasons that, Leighton and I would both recommend grassroots fabric pots, because they can be customized to fit into the area that you want. So if you're doing a 4x4 bed, you're going to want to have, 5 or 6 inches surrounding that for the pan underneath. So if you're buying a 4x4 pan, you're not going to want a 4x4 bed because it's not going to work. You're going to want a 3x3, and Grassroots is somebody that can actually create that for you.
Actually, I would recommend that they do like 3/6. So all you need is a couple inches to see down into the tray. That's all you really need. And you can always push it back or put a little pipe in there to hold it, because the super sacks or those fabric pots do kind of expand out as the soil gets older.
Okay. So, Squishy Mirror, bentonite clay, is that some of the clay that we would want to use in the Horizon?
That's white. Anything that's white is not good for what you're trying to do. Bentonite's great for like cleanses. That was a big thing in California for a while. It's great for natural swimming pools or ponds as a liner. But don't use bentonite clay as your clay source. You want color.
Okay. Yeah, something we have mentioned, and even Tom was putting a tube down to take a look, down underneath. You mentioned putting a PVC pipe in your pot vertically to see the water level, so when you water on the podcast in the past, would you put a bottom base pipe on top of the Horizon?
No, I wouldn't put it on top. You want it to go to the bottom of the pan or the bottom of your pot. And I've seen guys actually do a styrofoam ball with a little stick on it, or two styrofoams, one on the top, one on the bottom, and that way it goes up and down. They can actually see the level instead of having to use a flashlight, which really isn't going to tell you how deep it is anyway. You have to use a dipstick. So either one of those is fine. I mean, again, the whole goal is, as long as you have the hole set at the right level, you'll see the water drip it out. So you don't really need that pipe. But hey, teach their own.
Well, I think, and I know when I built a system, it wasn't a horizontal system. I was using that as where I could fill my water reservoir in the bottom, because I didn't have a pan in the bottom. I think with the pan, if you're using that as watering, because you're watering from the bottom, I don't know that you would really need to have something like that.
The only reason you might need it is if your fabric pot is the same size as your pan. Because you can't see down it, can't get your finger down in between it. So, again, as long as you have your holes at the right depth, you don't need it. But if you're worried about your holes overflowing on your, living room floor, then yeah, put that. If you don't have a space so that you can see it or get your finger down there, then use that in that case, in that scenario.
Okay, and that makes perfect sense.